Welcome to All Things Work. I'm your host, Ann Sparacco. For this episode, we're recording at SHRM Talent 2025, an annual conference providing cutting-edge insight organizations need to retain that top talent and get the best candidates in such a dynamic talent pool. And for more information on our conferences and how to sign up to attend and all of our events, check out the link in this episode description. Today, we're exploring how technology is transforming every aspect of the recruitment process from screening to onboarding. And here to guide us through this conversation is actually SHRM Talent speaker, Lori Kleiman, who is also the Managing Director of HR Topics. Welcome to All Things Work, Lori.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
We're excited to have you. This is such an important topic, especially as we see advancements in technology moving forward and so many questions we have about what's to come in the future. So let's kick things off with a little bit of a simple background on you and your work. Kind of what sparked your interest in helping organizations improve their HR functions?
Well, I've been in HR for 35 plus years, and I really see people not having the tools they need to do things effectively and efficiently. I love the speaker this morning talked about optimizing the way to do things, and that's really where technology is allowing our HR departments to optimize things so that we're spending our time driving toward the best candidates, not just all of the administrative nitty-gritty that needs to happen behind the scenes.
Right. It's like just a little helping tool.
Right.
Like intern helping us out, right?
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. So in your session here at SHRM Talent, your session was called 10 Tech Savvy Recruiting Tips. You discussed the evolving role of technology in recruiting. You touched on it a little bit, but what are some of the most significant changes you've seen in how organizations are approaching recruiting, with this new technology?
I think a lot of the systems can be implemented that feel very scary to people. People think they're going to take their jobs away, and really all the systems are doing is making the administrative part of recruiting, which can be horribly time consuming, much easier to deal with. So in my session, I talked a lot about creating candidate funnels for communication and using systems like Calendly to actually schedule, that we used to have to, it was 6 emails back and forth with a candidate to figure out when you could even do a phone screen with someone.
Yeah, it's almost too easy, right?
Right.
Sometimes.
Well, some of those pieces are, and to your point, Anne, unfortunately, what is happening in recruiting, because it is so easy for candidates to apply,
right?
You do get a lot of people that just aren't even the least bit qualified because they're just going through and they can quickly hit apply. So we as HR people and talent acquisition people, on the flip side, need to avail ourselves of the same technology to screen them out.
Right.
So that we don't have to, deal with some of those things.
So that leads me to be just curious about this. If you're using these types of tools to, schedule interviews, maybe get some answers from candidates before you schedule the interview, and the candidate doesn't really know how to use that technology, is that kind of like a filter? Like if they can't handle this, then they won't be able to handle the job that requires a lot of this tech.
Absolutely, Anne. 20 years ago, our first filter was how people treated the receptionist when they came in for their first interview. And that's not happening anymore. But these things, do they follow the steps you ask them to follow? I can tell you right now that when I ask someone a set of questions, so I always, when I'm screening, one of the technology things you can do is use initial questions on whatever interview board you're using or recruiting board and say, answer these when you send in your resume. So if people don't answer them, I have that happen all the time. I automatically reject them because I know they're just going through and throwing the resume in. And if they just say, see resume, no, thank you. I asked you to do something. And so to your point, and it's a great point, these are all ways we can use technology to really understand these candidates. They will often give me one-word answers. And it tells you a lot. If they really want this job, they're going to write 2 or 3 sentences and really communicate to me why they want that job.
Even if they have ChatGPT help them out.
Yep.
I mean, as long as you write a little bit more than just a word.
And you're absolutely right. Look, I use ChatGPT almost every day.
I do too. It's very
we
easy.
shouldn't be embarrassed to use it. For me, it's a lot easier than looking at a blank piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
But I can tell if they've used ChatGPT and they haven't edited it.
Oh, yeah, make it your own.
You can sometimes tell by some keywords there that they didn't even proof it.
Bring in that human side, that
Right.
human intelligence into the artificial intelligence.
Yes, exactly.
So I'd love to jump into a little bit of SHRM research. We love our
Sure.
data here because it supports a lot of the work we do. So we just had a recent report called The State of the Workplace released just this past month. And it found 25% of employees are actively searching for a new job or will start looking for one soon. It says a lot about the labor market.
Yeah.
So a question for you really is, how can organizations leverage technology to tap into this talent pool effectively, just because it's so dynamic and so wide, and expand and strengthen that talent pool?
Yeah. So the first half of the question is, how can we tap into those people? And I'm not a researcher, so I'm just going to say, from an ad hoc talking to people, it's a lot of the demands of returning to work. And people today, what I'm finding, hearing, reading, the SHRM research is saying, people would like to be back in the office probably 3 days a week. People do understand the value of being together. They want to be together for the most part. I mean, there are some people that want to work completely virtual. But by the same token, people have such demands on their lives that they want an employer that understands some form of flexibility and some need, even if it's as simple as allow people to start their morning from home, miss the horrible commute traffic into the city, and get to the office around 10 o'clock. And in the meantime, they're leveraging technology because they may be on a Zoom call. They may use that time to catch up on their emails from yesterday. There's plenty we can all do virtually. And so what I'm seeing as I had a client ask me, what do you think about having people come back to work 4 or 5 days a week? And I said, you better have a darn good reason.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Why do you want that? I mean,
Uh-huh.
if you're in healthcare, if you're in education, if
course
you're
you
in
gotta be in.
manufacturing, they have to be there. There's nothing you can do about it. But we have seen in the last 5 years, like it or not, that virtual can work for most of these businesses. And so people want to know why. Why do you, and if you give them a good reason, but we do know there are good reasons at least a couple days a week.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I think the hybrid model is very leading in
Right.
the way of what's going to come. So,
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. And technology has made it easier for us to be hybrid or remote for sure. So can you discuss how data analytics or other AI tools can assist in identifying potential candidates? Can you kind of tell us kind of what that looks like from, someone who's not in the recruiting process?
Right. Well, we've got positive and negatives. So the big concern of using AI, and the best example that I've heard is, let's say you're looking for an entry-level engineer and you have 10 or 15 people in your company that have done that job really well and been promoted and are great team members. You could download the applicants into a spreadsheet, let's just say, and then have the original resumes of those 10 really successful people. Put that all into AI and say, find me people like these 10 people because they've done a really good job. So that is a great way to use AI to filter out the candidate pool. However, what we know
Yeah.
is that if those 10 people are all men, because in the 1990s, most engineers were a bunch of guys, you're going to have diversity issues. You're going to have inclusion issues.
Exactly.
And so you always need that human aspect. But why not? Let's say you're hiring a welder. So or I'm going to give you a better example, because right now I'm hiring for a paralegal for an office. I am getting so many resumes from people that don't have a paralegal certificate. So why not take those 100 candidates before I do anything and say, get rid of if they do not have paralegal, now I'm probably down to 15 I have to screen. It'll take me no time at all. So those are some great ways we can use technology without eliminating potentially qualified candidates. But because, as we talked earlier, it is so easy for candidates to apply, it helps get rid of those people that are just absolutely not qualified.
Yeah, I always found it, especially when I was searching for a job, if it was almost too easy to apply, I said, "Oh, I'm never gonna get seen because there's thousands upon thousands of," or LinkedIn would say, "Oh, 1,800 people applied to this position," and then I just wouldn't even bother because it was just almost too easy.
But it's so interesting to hear that from a candidate's perspective, because I know my kids have searched for jobs and been like, well, why would I apply for this? And I, as an HR person, say, well, you don't know if 1,700 of those candidates are never going to make it through.
Exactly.
And so there is technology doing that. I mean, I'm not even sure why LinkedIn or Monster or Indeed shows the candidate that, because sometimes it's just not relevant.
Discouraging.
If you have, especially in larger organizations where they have the ability, even before AI existed, they have the ability to go through those 1,700 very quickly and see, whatever specific qualifications they may be looking for. And you may rise to the top. Somebody's going to get the job, right?
Somebody's got to get the job. Let's hope.
Right.
So you touched on just inclusion a little bit, and trying to make sure that the AI tool is not just going off of, just what you're feeding it. You have to make sure you're feeding it the correct information to get the maximum outcome. So can you touch on maybe a couple more steps organizations can take to ensure that using these AI tools also are implementing inclusive practices? Because we don't want to exclude, that's the whole beauty of this dynamic talent pool. We don't want to exclude people just because we think, oh, we need this type of person for the role, right?
Right, exactly. And so some of it is blind recruiting. There's another example from the world of symphonies that I don't know if you're from, probably not, because it's an HR kind of thing. But symphonies used to be very male dominated, which I think is fascinating. Who would think that there'd be all these? And when I'll call it an interview, but auditions. When they had auditions, they could tell who the females were because of the sound of their shoes. And so now today, when you audition for almost any symphony in the United States, it's behind a screen and you do it barefoot.
Oh,
and people who walk on have no shoes on. And they just play their instrument. It's sort of like The Voice. You know?
I was just thinking like
really,
one of the
maybe
Masked
they should
Singer.
use that. But they can tell. So in AI, I think it's important too what I've learned with AI is to be very conversational. And so to say to AI, we are looking for a diverse talent pool. We would like to make sure we're inclusive. I believe it has to go way beyond color of skin, gender, neighborhood in your community, what kinds of activities they're involved in, all those kinds of things, college and no college. So it's really explaining to your system that you want it to be more inclusive and that sort of thing.
So there's a lot of tools and technologies, from screening to onboarding. It's a lot of steps in
Right.
between. So can you talk about maybe some examples of the tools that HR professionals would use in these steps of the process for the candidate?
Yeah, so I can tell you some of the ones that I use and I really believe set people apart. Using those very initial questions. And then once I determine that a candidate looks like they have the basic qualifications I'm looking for before I'm even willing to spend any time, I have an automated reply where they complete another 6 or 7 questions. I believe still in this world that the written word tells us a lot, and we can tell how much time people take. Can they put a sentence together? There are a few jobs in this world where they're not going to be able to have to just write even a simple email to someone. So, so all of that for me is automated. Then once I read their response and determine that I do probably want to talk to them, the initial step would be a Zoom or Teams interview, and that all gets scheduled automatically through Calendly. So you can have all these processes where you don't have to be involved. And one of the things that I especially love with the automated scheduling systems is that I can change things around and they can change things around. So if they make an appointment a week from now and I have something come up, I can just quickly move the appointment, say, does this work for you? If not, here's the link, pick another time. So I used to feel very committed to those, anchored to those times on my schedule. And I think we've all learned life doesn't work that way anymore. It just doesn't work
We
that
have
way.
to admit we're humans at some
Right.
point.
And
Yeah.
people are no problem. They either it
Mhm.
works, it doesn't work, they schedule it around. So all those ways. The other thing I've heard people are starting to do, and I haven't yet, but I think it's a good idea, is they are actually recording what I'll call the Zoom screen, and they're sharing that with hiring managers. So why not, if you have 4 candidates that seem really good to you, why not send your screen to the hiring manager and say, which 2 of these do you want to start with? I mean, I wouldn't send them someone that I don't think is qualified, but if you have 4, instead of them wasting time and having 4 people taking time off work to come in for an in-person interview, let them see what those initial answers looked like.
Yeah, saving a lot of time.
Right. Yeah.
So we discussed about efficiency. It makes our day-to-day tasks so much easier. There's no doubt about it. We love it. But it's really important to bring in that human touch. Like we talked about, it's important to remind yourself, hey, don't just rely on the machine. You have to have inclusive practices. But outside of just inclusive practices, how do you recommend organizations balance efficiency, with that personalization to avoid candidates feeling like they're just a number in the system? You don't want to feel like, okay, next, number 2, next, and you don't want to feel like that candidate walking up like, here's my ticket. So how do you balance that?
One of the things we know is that most candidates out there today are talking to 3 or 4 different companies. And one of the ways or reasons they're going to select your organization is because they like you. Quite simply, you have demonstrated that you have a culture that they want to be a part of. So one of the things that I love to talk to HR people about is the importance of really understanding marketing. And the systems, I like to have people create a candidate funnel. And what is that? That is a series of emails that can be automatically scheduled that go to your candidate immediately when they apply. Hi, we got your resume. We're so excited. Give us a few days to look at it. We'll be back in touch with you. 3 days later, you might send them an email that says, we're still considering you for this position. Make sure you look at our website so that you can see what we're all about and the great work we're doing. 6 days later, you send them an email that says, have you met our leadership team? Here are their LinkedIn profiles, whatever, so that, and it's all automated. You're not doing this, but it helps as you're talking to the hiring manager, as you're looking at the comp structure, that you're reaching out and touching them. And those emails can all be customized where it drops in the first name, it drops in the position they're considering, it drops in whatever you want it to do. And so I encourage HR people to talk to their marketing teams about how they stay in touch with customers and replicate it for their candidates.
Because at the end of the day, you're asking someone to basically just trust, have faith in this company and the culture and kind of buy in.
Right.
With their talent,
And I've had plenty of candidates say to me, how do I really know? You're telling me this is a great place to work, but how do I really know that what you're telling me is in fact true?
Yeah. Candidates don't want to just hear it. They want to feel it.
Exactly.
Would you say it's really critical today, now more than ever, especially with so many people, being remote and not really super connected at work, and they're trying to get more connected as they're returning to in-office? Would you say, that's just a really critical step in engaging the candidates through the recruitment process?
Through the recruitment process, and to your point, Anne, I encourage people to do it with new hires.
Yes.
So
onboarding.
Your first 90 days, have these funnels already set up. Have a video from your CEO that goes out, and it all can just be random, on day 12, on day 17, because you don't want it to look formulaic.
Okay, so we spoke a lot from the HR side. Let's flip the script here a little bit and get kind of through the lens of the candidate, because that's such an important thing to keep in mind. So do you know of, or are there any innovative tools or trends you've seen organizations use that kind of give a little more power to the candidate, make them feel like they have control of their journey in this process?
Well, I know that there are some systems where the candidate can see where they are in the process.
Okay.
If they've been considered, if you're evaluating their resume. I think that the ongoing communication of where you stand in the pool is good. I've asked people, do you want those standard rejection notices? And I've had my kids and my nieces and nephews say, you know what? It doesn't really matter. If candidates are finding that they're applying to a lot of jobs and they're not hearing back on anything. I had somebody just recently who's in my sphere of work that I do say to me something. She said, I'm out of work, and I probably said, send me your resume because I hear about things all the time, which I do. She's an HR person. She sends me her resume. I open it up. The first 3 words, actively looking for a sales position. I said, what is this? She goes, oh my God, I don't know how that got there. I don't want to be in sales. I said, well, let's just start there. That's why you're not hearing back.
Oh my goodness.
For HR jobs.
Check your resumes, people.
Right. Check. I mean, if
double check those words.
Right.
Yeah.
Want the most power, just make sure what you're sending is relevant. And so
would love to leave our audience with some, final thoughts, because you gave a great speaking session at Talent, and we would love to hear from you on kind of what advice or what final thought you really would love to leave our audience looking to advance recruiting strategies through technology, and maybe also you left some, advice for the candidate as well. So I love that.
One of the things I think that we haven't touched on that I explored in my program is most companies have a career page on their website, but very few of them use search engine optimization to draw people to those pages. And I was intrigued to ask the audience how many had career pages, and almost everybody raised their hand, and then how many use SEO, and it was maybe 5 people in the whole audience. And so that's another place that you can really work closely with your marketing team to understand what keywords do you need to put on there. I forget what it's called, but there are like tags you put behind pictures so that the pictures of your happy employees are recognized by Google, so that when somebody goes to Google and searches IT jobs in Nashville, Tennessee, in the healthcare industry,
Right.
your career page is something that's identified.
It's amazing how technology can help with so many different strategies.
Right, right.
All right, Lori, thank you so much for sharing your insight and guiding us through this engaging conversation. Really, really enjoyed the examples you provided as well.
Great, thanks. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, that'll do it for this week's episode. For more information on the podcast, including newsletter and research on these big topics, just head to shrm.org/allthingswork. Like, share, and comment on social media. We want you to be part of the conversation. That'll do it for this time. We'll catch you next time. SHRM.